23rd, 2024. I'll call the meeting to order and ask for the roll call, please.
Councilmember Abdelgawad.
Here.
Councilmember Baker.
Present.
Councilmember Barber.
Present.
Councilmember Burke.
Present.
Councilmember Circo.
Present.
Councilmember Ingert.
Present.
Councilmember Holman.
Present.
Councilmember Mills.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Here. Would y'all please rise and join me in a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, we don't have any presentations or personal appearances this evening, so I'll move on to the staff report. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Salisbury to make a staff report for Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. Just a couple items I want to highlight. 163rd Street is now open. They opened it about 8 o'clock this morning, so you can now use that. The Sunset Lane project is progressing as we would expect. They're working on water line extension and the storm sewer. The sidewalk project, they completed the Shadowwood neighborhood, and they have a couple other odds and ends, but they're pretty much done. So we're wrapping up a lot of our projects for the year and getting ready for next year's projects. That concludes my staff report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Salisbury. Anyone have any questions? Hearing none, I'll turn it back to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Mustine to make a report for Parks and Recreation.
Thanks, sir. Mayor, members of the council, I also submitted a written report. This particular one is kind of a recap of our capital projects that we've done over the past calendar year, fiscal year. Right now, we're right at about $6 million worth of capital projects. By the time they're all complete, a couple things, the bridges at Memorial Park, they're in process is really what they are. They'll probably take a break for the next couple days and come back in, but if you drive by, you'll see the bridges laid out and stationed and ready to go. So hope to have that done within the next week or two. The roundabout and the islands at Recreation Park, we wrapped that up, and if you haven't had a chance to drive through Recreation Park, I recommend you do that. They look really good, really dresses the park up. And finally, the ice rink, the ice is freezing. We should be open for business this weekend as we scheduled. So happy to answer any questions over the projects that we've done this year. That concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mustine. Anyone have any questions? Yes, Mr. Holman.
Been a while. Can you give us a status update on the rack? It looks like it's about finished. I can't remember if we had a scheduled opening or anything like that.
Yes, sir. So the rack is open for business, and we went in. I went over the day. It's the first day since we've been open since school's been out. There were probably 25, 30 kids in there playing some basketball and volleyball. We have a chamber event January 10th. We're waiting on a couple different items to get wrapped up, and then we'll schedule a ribbon cutting. But we want everything to be in place before we do the official ribbon cutting, so that the pads on the corners and the walls and things like that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else? I noticed along Lucy Webb, the sidewalk on the south side, is that part of our trails management project?
No, that's just part of one of Trent's projects, just
okay.
repairing some
That's
some
Public
damaged
Works
sidewalk
project.
areas.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Anyone? Thank you,
All right,
Mr.
thank you.
Mustine. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. I would ask Ms. Harmer to make a report for the Communications Department.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Update, if you haven't seen online, we have beautiful Raymore mural mugs for sale during regular business hours from the utility window. Those feature the big public art project that the Arts Commission brought to the city on Harmon Tire's wall of their building earlier this summer. $12 each, and the proceeds do go to the Raymore Community Foundation. The plastic bag recycling update, I probably have 40 pounds of bags in my office and stuffed under the stairwells that I need to turn in, but we are about 20%, a little over 20% to our goal of collecting 1,000 pounds of bags by the end of September. And if we meet that goal, we will get a bench made out of recycled plastic for a public space. I'm thinking right back here on the circle. Just a reminder that please do try to use your reusable tote. Don't try to get plastic bags just to turn in here, although that's nice. Appreciate the enthusiasm on that, but just that project is going well. And also the winter spring issue of the Review, which is mailed to all Raymore addresses, which also includes the Parks and Rec program guide. Pretty much wrapped up. Going to be going to the printer hopefully this week, at the end of this week, if I get approval from Mr. Fearborn. And it will be in mailboxes at the beginning of the year, and we'll have a lot of good information on upcoming programs and interesting things that will impact our residents in the coming months. That's all I have for you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Harmer. Does anybody have any questions, Ms. Harmer? Thank you. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Ms. Harmer. As the mayor could also attest to, it is virtually impossible sometimes to see Ms. Harmer in her office because she's just surrounded by plastic bags.
Well, I
and bags
usually
of plastic.
go to my office through her, so it's getting me some exercise on the obstacle course that I take through there now.
A successful program so far.
Yes, it is.
Would remind the council there is no meeting next week. It is the 5th Monday of the year, but would alert the council to be prepared for the following Monday's meeting, first Monday of January. We do have a number of UDC items that we're going to be bringing to the council for your consideration and input and feedback on. That concludes staff reports tonight, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. Anyone have any questions of Mr. Fearborn? Okay. Move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda has 4 items this evening, and I would entertain a motion to dispose of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I'm going to separate out some of the items on the consent agenda as I had to
Fine.
leave the meeting early on the meeting of December 9th. I was here only in part for that meeting. So I move, sir, at this time that we approve part of the consent agenda as presented to include item B, Madison Valley Phase 3 acceptance of public improvements. Item C, 163rd Street Sunset Lane to Madison Street acceptance of public improvements. And item D, appointment of Mike Wilson to the Park Board.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Abdelgawad. Motion's been made and seconded to approve parts B, C, and D of the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Now I'll entertain a motion to dispose of the minutes of the December 9th meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Abdelgawad.
I move that we approve item A on the consent agenda, which is the city council meeting minutes from December 9th, 24.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Motion's been made and seconded to approve item A, city council meeting minutes for December the 9th. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? We have 6 yes. How many? Up again, please. Are there 6 yes? Any noes? Any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Okay, thank you. Motion carries 6 yes, no noes, and 2 abstentions. Okay, so now we'll move on to unfinished business. As you will recall, we continued the meeting from last meeting on this particular item. We had opened the public hearing. We had not yet had a staff report, but to help everyone remember what this is about, I would ask for a rereading of Bill 3933 by title only, please.
The first reading of Bill 3933 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, vacating a portion of the alley right-of-way located in Block 14 of the original plat of the City of Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you, ma'am. Also, there had not yet been a full staff report, and the public hearing is still open, as I remind you, and I would like a staff report, please.
Thank you, sir. Included in your packet was a copy of the staff report, and I'll note that the applicant is here this evening with a couple exhibits and a couple videos for the council after our presentation. To kind of begin, the request this evening is a joint application between 2 adjoining property owners in Original Town, Mary Plunkett and Pam Hatcher. Mary Plunkett owns the property at 105 East Olive, which is the residential home that abuts Olive Street, and Pam Hatcher is the owner of 303 South Washington, which is the multi-tenant commercial building that fronts Washington right there on the corner of Washington and Olive. The request this evening is to vacate the portion of the existing 14-foot alleyway that exists that abuts their 2 properties, essentially from Olive Street, approximately 120 feet south of Block 14 within the Original Town subdivision. The city controls the right-of-way within that portion of the alleyway. It abuts the two property owners. They're responsible for the maintenance of it, and for a couple reasons that they'll explain in their presentation, they have requested that the city council consider vacating that portion and reverting that section back to the two property owners that adjoin that area. A little bit of background on the property in terms of zoning and some existing land uses. The property is zoned R1 single family. It also has the original town overlay district on it, so R1-OT. The surrounding development is generally a mix of existing single-family homes and kind of mixed office commercial zoning. The majority of this block is zoned a combination of R1, original town overlay, and C1, original town overlay within that area of original town. The total area or square footage of the area requested to be vacated is approximately 0.04 acres. Again, it's simply for the stretch that abuts the two property owners and not the entire length of that alleyway. When we started this application, it went to the Planning and Zoning Commission back in November and October. We did send out 11 notices to the adjoining property owners, letting them know what the request was. We also published the City Council public hearing in the November 21st edition of the North Cass Herald for what was originally the previous meeting, and as the mayor indicated, we continued that public hearing into this evening. A little bit of history and kind of background on these specific properties. The original plat of Raymore, which is the original town, was originally recorded in 1912, so quite some time ago. All 20 blocks there within original town all have a 14-foot wide access alleyway easement that traverses the center of those blocks. Of those original 20 alleys, 3 of them have been formally vacated by the city, and I included some of those in your staff report. The first one would be Block 3, which is the home of the First Baptist Church. That was originally vacated in May of 2003, and that was to accommodate the expansion of that church on their property. Block number 6, which is the Presbyterian Church, staff could not find any documentation in our records of when that was vacated, but the county records do show that that was vacated at some point in the past, again, to accommodate some type of development that was going on at the time. And then most recently in July of 2020, when the city approved the development for TB Anastation Park, the city also vacated that alleyway as a means of restricting traffic through the park and kept some of the utilities in place that were within that easement or the alleyway, but the alleyway was formally vacated by the city at that time. Additionally, in 2003, back to the First Baptist Church, they had submitted a request to vacate the actual street right-of-way within the city, and the city council ended up denying that request. And then with respect to the two properties in question, the multi-tenant building here at 303 South Washington was built and completed in the 1970s. And then in the late 1990s, early 2000s, a lot split was approved there on the block that contains the residential structure, which permitted the home at 105 East Olive, which is the applicant's property, to be completed. That was completed in January of 2000. Looking at some of the background of the request in city code, on page 3 of your staff report, you'll find the section of code that outlines the process for vacating right-of-way, or in this case, alley right-of-way. So the city has exclusive control over its public streets, public alleys, public right-of-way. The alleyway in its current condition is entirely unimproved for the most part. It contains mostly grassy areas that aren't necessarily suitable for vehicular traffic. Only a few portions of alleyways within the original town area overall have been improved for vehicular use, meaning that some of them have some gravel pads, some sort of hard surface for vehicles to drive on without creating damage to the grass or tracking mud on the street, et cetera. One block does have concrete paved alleyways. There's an entire block of original town near Monroe Street that utilizes the back alley to access rear-loaded garages. So that is the only alley that is fully paved in concrete and accessible by vehicles consistently. When right-of-way is vacated within the statute, the area that is vacated reverts back to the property owners. It's basically split down the middle evenly. And so both applicants here this evening have indicated their intent, if it is approved, to take over ownership of the alleyway, split down the middle, and continue to care for it in its current form. Overall, the city does not maintain the alleyways in the sense that we do not mow them. We do not fix any of the damage that occurs because of cars going through them. That does fall on the property owner. I would compare it similarly to the sidewalk in the front of most homes. There's usually a 3 to 4 foot planting strip. That technically is city right of way, but it's the homeowner's responsibility to maintain that. City does not take owner or maintenance responsibility for those areas. As I kind of mentioned, original town is kind of odd. There's been many homes that have been replatted, subdivided, re-subdivided, different styles of homes that have been built that don't necessarily require the access of the alleyway to provide access to their garages or their accessory structures. If you, kind of one of the surveys that staff did as you walk through the alleyways in original town, there are several instances where we have accessory structures like sheds or some detached garages that encroach into the alleyway. There's several instances of wood piles or kind of small debris piles that look like they are to encroach in the alleyway. So generally just kind of inconsistent as you go around original town. There's many that have very mature oak trees that are within the alleyway that prevent access. The point being, in general, it's just very inconsistent, the condition of the alleyways throughout original town. And then lastly, in that section, I kind of pulled one of the sections that was adopted as a part of our original town neighborhood plan. In general, the plan would recommend that we do not vacate the alleyways. It does give kind of a couple qualifiers in instances where that would be preferred versus not. And one of the things that is included in that is that alleyways should not be vacated and should be utilized for site access where compatible with residential development. Some of the site pictures, and if you visited this site, you'll see that neither of the homes that abut this alleyway have parking areas that are accessible via the alleyway. And so one of them, for the commercial building, the access is gained directly from Washington Street, the parking lot. The residential home has a driveway that accesses directly to Olive Street. And so in our research, kind of looking at that adopted original town neighborhood plan, staff would make the assumption that these two properties are not considered compatible with respect to what the goals of that original town plan were. Last but not least, there are some utilities currently in the alleyway that the right-of-way provides access to. In original town, the majority of the blocks, the water line extends through the alleyway and the sewer lines extend through the street. So if vacated, the applicant, as part of the condition, would be required to dedicate this as a utility easement so that city would have the opportunity to access the water main if we needed to. The same would go for the overhead power lines and communication lines that are overhead there in original town. So both applicants have agreed to dedicate that easement if this is approved to ensure that access and would allow them to treat it more similarly to a standard utility easement that you would find on most residential properties. The Planning and Zoning Commission met and reviewed this application on December 3rd. They did vote 7-0 to recommend approval to the City Council. And then, as the mayor mentioned, we opened the public hearing at our last meeting and voted to continue it to this meeting. I did have a chance, because of that continuance, to include in the packet the draft minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, so the council could have a better understanding of some of the comments that were provided there. I will note that the commission has not had a chance to meet again since that meeting, so they have not been formally approved. So at this point, I would consider those draft minutes until the commission has a chance to actually review them and approve them. But if there are any questions on those, I know the mayor was present for that meeting, as was myself. So happy to answer any questions on that. That will conclude my staff report unless there are any other questions of the council.
Thank you, Mr. Gress. Anyone have any questions of Mr. Gress at this time? If not, would the applicant care to address the council at this time?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Pam Hatcher. My address is 1403 North Madison, Raymore, Missouri, and I am the broker and owner of Integrity Group Real Estate. I office out of 103 South Jefferson on 58 Highway next to Harmon Tire. My building here is located at 303 South Washington, and I've taken the liberty to enlarge some pictures to explain a couple of the problems that's going on. Please excuse my crochet hook as a pointer because I could not find my pointer as I was leaving the house tonight. As you can tell, this is Washington, Olive, Franklin, and Plum Street. TB Hanna is sitting right here. This is the alleyway that we're referencing, and I'm going to give this to Mr. Gress to hand around. I'm wanting to point this out with this alleyway because anyone who is wanting to utilize this has access from the southern point of the alleyway. This is an enlarged version of the exact same picture. The reason I'm pointing this out is if you drove by the site, you will note that to access the alleyway, there is a very deep ditch and a fire hydrant sitting right there, which Mr. Gress addressed that the water easement is going through there. You cannot turn and access that alleyway without trespassing on my property. Everyone that is utilizing this alleyway is trespassing on my property, going in over here where a culvert had been built by a previous owner of this building, because there used to be a garage door back here and they used to store some cars in there. And they're turning onto this culvert, they're driving on my property over here and then driving down here and almost hitting the utility pole. Then they're parking, they're doing whatever they need to do, and then when they exit, instead of backing up and going back, they're turning and on the south end of my building and coming through on the side property of my land and then coming out my parking lot. And this is on a weekly basis. I currently lease to a tenant that is Fearless Dance Studio. You may be aware of them. It's owned by Haley Letchworth. She is a local Raymore resident, small business owner, and community supporter. She graduated from Ray-Pec High School, and she is the dance team coach at Ray-Pec High School as well. She teaches children from the age of 3 to 18. This is a significant liability to her and her business, having these cars coming out from a blind spot on the side of the property, as well as to me, the property owner. This liability will bleed over to the city with this trespassing occurring on the property due to this alleyway. Thank you. This needs to be addressed because this cannot continue. They are not accessing the alleyway in a manner in which it should be. They're utilizing my property to do so, and I would sincerely ask you all to look at this and address it. We're only trying to address the property that abuts my property and the property that abuts Ms. Plunkett's property. Thank you all.
Excuse me, does anyone have any questions of the applicant at this time? Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Did you have something else?
Well, I do have 3 videos. Do you want to show all of them later, or?
I will do what the council would prefer. I've got 6 videos, 6 short clips, 3 per applicant, that show some of the things that Ms. Hatcher was talking about. If you would like, I can take control of your screen and broadcast them to you all, but.
Like to see him? Okay, yeah, please.
Thank you.
All right,
Number 2, 3, and 4, please.
Perfect.
okay.
Do you all see my computer screen on your computer? Okay.
Yes.
Great. This would be the first one, and I'm going to skip ahead to later in the video at 2 minutes.
At 2 minutes, please.
Yes.
The first 2 minutes, you're just seeing them pulling in. I'm trying to get to the point of showing them exiting. Oh, thank you. Now they're turning south onto my property and going down the side of my building. This is how they exit after doing whatever it is that they're doing in the back of the property.
And there's never been permission granted for that?
Never been asked. This is where the car comes in on my property, it cuts at right there at the corner of the fence, and then is going down. And actually, they're on my property right now when they're right there next to that electrical pole. They're not even in the alleyway. All those tire tracks right there is not even in the alleyway. And we have numerous videos showing this over and over, but you can tell even, from my blown up picture, here's where the electrical pole is. They're, completely driving on my property.
Mm-hmm.
So even when they think they're using the alleyway.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mayor, if there were other questions.
All right. Any questions? Mr. Mills?
The one question I have, if it seems like that there's a bush and like a tree ring of bricks or something that's basically impeding these cars from being able to get square down the alleyway. Who planted that?
I believe that can be addressed by the next applicant.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Would the other applicant wish to address the council at this time?
Hi, my name is Mary Plunkett. I live at 105 East Olive Street. I'm a single mom with an 11-year-old son, and I'm here today to express my concerns regarding the alley that runs alongside my house and the negative impact it has had on us during the 8 years that we have lived here. Our home is in very close proximity to the alley, so when vehicles drive through there, it's as if they are driving through our front yard. The alley runs very close to our yard. We've experienced numerous times people walking through the alley and kicking at our fence to scare our dogs. They often walk their dog to poop there, and they never clean it up, leaving us to do it. We've also witnessed on several occasions people walking through the alley and throwing things over our fence and into our backyard. I feel like the vehicles driving through the grass is a safety concern. The alley is grass only, and it looks like part of the yard. It doesn't look like a road, so to a child it appears as it's a safe place to play, when in fact it's not because of the vehicles driving through there. On several occasions, my son has been outside playing, and he's gotten upset because people have driven through the alley and ran over his baseball gear and toys, even while he's outside playing. Young children, including my 2-year-old granddaughter, play there on the grass, and I just feel like it's an accident waiting to happen by allowing vehicles to drive through there. The alley has also caused a financial hardship. I am responsible for mowing and maintaining my portion of the alley, but due to vehicles tearing up the grass and causing ruts, it makes it difficult to mow. I'm constantly buying bags of dirt to fill in the ruts and grass seed, trying to keep it looking nice. Between that and cleaning up the dog poop that is always left there, it often feels unfair that I'm responsible for mowing and maintaining it while others just tear it up. Since this is an alley, I'm required to obtain permission from the city before planting bushes. On June 22nd, 2024, I obtained permission to do so. My 11-year-old son picked out a bush from the store, and he dug the hole and he planted it all by himself, and he was very proud of it. After planting the bush, there were neighbors that didn't realize permission was obtained through the city, so they poured poison on that bush and they killed it. About a week later, they dug up 2 other bushes and threw them over my fence into my backyard. Since it's an alley, they were never held accountable. So this impacted me monetarily with no option to seek fair compensation. The situation with the alley is making it really difficult to live here because the laws don't really protect us if people misuse it. By vacating the alley, it will help provide a safer and more peaceful environment in which we've never been able to experience while living here. Thank you for your time and your consideration for vacating the alley.
Anyone have any questions of the applicant at this time? Okay, thank
And
you,
I
ma'am.
have 3 videos too. I have like 8 years worth of videos, but there's 3.
Okay.
And this is where they come to our house and they pulled the bushes out. And then after they pulled them out, they come back. Oh, that's a different one. So that she's walking her dog. She sees sticks that are in the alley. She stops and picks them up and throws them over my fence and onto my table. And if you could hear the volume, you could hear it hitting the table each time. And this goes back to where after they pulled the bushes out, they walk down, they come back, and they then throw them over my fence.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Mr. Circo?
Yes, first question, do you know these people who are doing this?
I know the people that live right behind me. We've had issues with them ever since we moved here, on like the third day that we moved here. All the other people, we've never met them. My son doesn't know them. We've never met them. They're all friends to the people that live right behind us.
Okay. Have you approached them at any time about what you see on the video and throwing the plants over?
I was going to call the police. Well, I was going to take it into my own hands and go over there. But then I called the police because I didn't feel that was appropriate for me to go over there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Mills?
This would be a question for Mr. Gress or city staff. Is it a common place for us to approve people planting trees or bushes in a dedicated alley to the city?
So, as the applicant mentioned, the genesis, I guess, of this request goes back several months of some of the issues in terms of some property damage to the alleyway and some things like that. So in essence, kind of what had transpired there is that the applicant had reached out to our code enforcement officer, who had also been trying to assist in some of the issues. What had happened at the time with the request was to put some plantings in the alleyway. In staff's mind, what we thought was going to be planted were those shrubs, but we were under the impression they were to be planted up against the fence to prohibit some of the things that she talked about with kicking the fence and scaring some of the dogs. As it turns out, they were obviously planted in a slightly different location, which by code is not permitted. So in our research of kind of going through the alleyways, the issue that staff was having, as I mentioned in my staff report, there are other areas all throughout Original Town where there are mature oak trees, there are sheds, there are wood piles, there are other obstructions within the alleyway that exist. And so the challenge that staff was having was telling a resident that you can't put something in the alleyway, but all these other obstructions and encroachments can still exist. So it was that really started our work on this application on how do we actually work to solve the issue that's going on. So staff did an analysis or some field, research on every alleyway in Original Town, was able to document some of the encroachments that I mentioned in terms of mature oak trees and things along those lines. So to answer your question, they were approved, but we did not approve them in the location that they were in specifically. After the fact, it became difficult to, as I mentioned, tell one resident that you can't have that in the alleyway when we have several other instances of similar encroachments, which then, through all of that, kind of generated the request to seek to vacate the alleyway to accomplish solving some of the problems that the applicant is dealing with.
Thank you, Your Honor. I assume you didn't approve them being removed either, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just general knowledge question. If we vacate the alley, we're still going to maintain a utility easement because there's water lines in there?
That's correct. That was the practice for all of the other times that we vacated the alleyway, so that would be the same for this case.
And with that being said, do we know, is the applicant planning on extending their fence line to meet in the alley so that that would prevent, or I guess the question would be is if the applicant can move the fence, and I don't know if that's the way it works with vacation of alleyways, but say there is a water main break, does the city incur the cost if we have to take the fence down to get in there and do repairs?
So maybe a twofold answer. The first question is I do believe the applicant intends to construct a fence through the alleyway if it is vacated. The intent of that with the dedication of the easement would be to treat it like any other utility easement is in the city. And what I mean by that is you cannot construct a fence over right-of-way, but you can construct a fence over an easement. Within our code, there is a section that states that if the city or Evergy or any other utility provider has to gain access to the easement, the cost of repairing that is on the resident. I know historically most utility companies will be very careful when they disassemble a fence and will typically put it back, but the code does not require them to do that at the end of the day.
Okay. Anyone else have anything at this time? Okay. Well, the public hearing is open at this time. If anyone from the public would care to address the council on this particular issue, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and I'd entertain a motion to dispose of the first reading.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Holman?
Sir, I move that we approve Bill 3933, Original Town Alleyway Vacation.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Abdel-Gawad. Any further discussion? Mr. Mills?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
The motion was made, or you mentioned ask a motion to dispense of the first reading. Our agenda is calling this the second reading.
If you heard my recitation, though, I said the first reading. So it actually is the first reading, sir. So we'll see this at our next meeting.
I understand, but that's okay even though our agenda says it's the second reading?
I would turn to Mr. Zur.
Yes, it is. This is an unfinished business because it was brought up at the first go-around, so the notion of having the second reading on your agenda is not as important as the unfinished business portion, which is referenced. The public hearing was open at the last meeting. It was under first reading at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Burke?
Just real quickly, I wanted to thank the applicants for coming and speaking to us. It made me feel.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Circo?
Just one more for Ms. Hatcher and Ms. Plunkett. You guys heard Mr. Gress, so you are prepared if we vote this in, if you want to build a fence, that you would understand the right-of-way and what you would have to do. You're good with that, I assume?
I completely understand those requirements. I will be taking on the expense of that fence, and I will be putting in a vinyl one with a panel that was easily removable to access the water.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? All right, carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3926 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3926 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Terry Snelling Construction, Inc. for the Operations Haul-Off Project, City Project Number 25-007, in the amount of $30,000, and authorizing the city manager to approve change orders within established budget constraints.
If there are no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3926, award of contract for Operations Haul-Off Project.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Abdel-Gawad. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3926. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. Okay, please have the second reading of Bill 3934 by title only.
Second reading of Bill 3934 by title only, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the City of Raymore, Missouri to enter into an intergovernmental cooperative agreement with the City of Belton, Missouri and Mason Banks for the provision of extraterritorial water services.
Thank you, ma'am. If there are no further questions on this item, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of it.
Your Honor.
Mr. Holman?
Sir, I move that we approve Bill 3934, the Intergovernmental Cooperative Agreement for Water Services.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Abdel-Gawad. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3934. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. We'll now move on to new business. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3935 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3935 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, calling for and establishing the date of the general municipal election to be held on April 8th, 2025.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Ms. Hill to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Raymore City Charter in Section 9.1 calls for the regular municipal election to be held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in April. The municipal election for 2025 will be held on Tuesday, April 8, 2025, for a 3-year term for mayor, currently held by Christopher Turnbow, a 2-year term for council member in Ward 1, currently held by Donald Baker, a 2-year term for council member in Ward 2, currently held by Joseph Burke, a 2-year term for council member in Ward 3, currently held by Kevin Barber, and a 2-year term for council member in Ward 4, currently held by Thomas Ingert. Candidate filing began Tuesday, December 17, 2024, and ends Tuesday, January 21, 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions of staff on this particular item? If not, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of it.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Holman?
Sir, I move that we approve Bill 3935, calling for the April 8th, 2025 municipal election.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Abdel-Gawad. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3935. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3936 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3936 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with 510 Printing / Minuteman Press for printing and mailing services for the review.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Ms. Harmer to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you. As we do every 3 years, we put out a bid for the printing of the review and the Parks and Rec program guide, the 20 pages for city news, 20 pages for Parks and Recreation information. So the 40-page magazine is printed 3 times a year and is mailed to every Raymore zip code address with a current circulation at 11,300. The city currently holds a contract with 510 Printing Minuteman Press, which was previously called a graphic resource, and that company did come in with the lowest and best proposal. So we do recommend approval of that award of contract to Minuteman Press.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions of Ms. Harmer on the contract? Okay, thank you. Anything else on that, Mr. Fearborn? Okay. If there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3936, award of contract to 510 Printing Minuteman Press for printing and mailing services.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Abdelgawad. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3936. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously 8-0. Thank you. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3937 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3937 by title only, an ordinance authorizing and directing submission to the voters of the City of Raymore, Missouri at the election on April 8, 2025, the proposal to authorize the imposition of a public safety tax for hiring, paying, equipping, and training police officers at a rate of 1/4%.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Fearborn, could I have the staff report?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Zur to begin the staff report on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. Mayor, members of the council, before you this evening with Bill 3937 is a proposed sales tax of 1/4%, authorized by statute. You could do a full 1/2%. The basis for this is public safety, as identified under the staffing survey that was completed by the city in 2021. Within 5 years, they identified an additional 20 police officers being required for the city or recommended for the city. The funds that would be accumulated from this proposed sales tax, if approved by the voters in April, would provide for non-commingling funds, so they would be identified solely for public safety purposes, and they would also not be utilized under the terms of the ordinance for replacing or supplanting other funds so that it could be transferred elsewhere, all on the basis of making sure that those funds are dedicated entirely for public safety purposes. What you'd vote on this evening is simply to have it placed upon the ballot in April. Would conclude my report.
Could you please go ahead and read the referendum item so that in the event that folks haven't had an opportunity to see what it is that we're putting on a ballot, or whether you're going to do
No
that?
more thunder, sir. That is
Sorry.
exactly how he was going to follow it up.
Oh,
So
okay.
go ahead.
Well, you can if you
Well,
want.
it sounds
So-
better coming from the attorney, sir.
Okay.
If placed upon the ballot, it would simply read, shall the city of Raymore impose a sales tax of 1/4% for the sole purpose of providing revenues for hiring, paying, equipping, and training additional police officers pursuant to section 92.500 of the revised statutes of Missouri, which said revenue shall not be commingled with non-public safety funds and shall not displace funds regularly budgeted for public safety.
Thank you, sir. Did you have
Sir,
something?
in
that-
accordance
yeah.
with section 92.500 RSMO, the transparency of these particular funds, if passed by the voters, would require the city to set up a separate public safety sales tax revenue fund. We would have every intention of doing just that. So no, as far as the commingling or any of that would be concerned, all of the revenues generated by the tax would be visible going into the fund. All of the uses being paid for additional police officers only, would be seen in the expenses of that particular fund forevermore and per statute. That
Thank you,
concludes
sir.
staff report on this item, sir.
Thank you, sir. Anybody have any questions of staff on this particular item? I know we talked about it in work session, but didn't know if anybody had any additional questions. All right, well, if there are no additional questions of staff on this item, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of Bill 3937.
Your Honor,
Mr. Holman,
I move that we approve Bill 3937, directing submission of a public safety sales tax on the April 8th, 2025 ballot.
thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Abdul-Gawad. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3937. Any further discussion? Mr. Holman?
Yes, sir. So you stated it, but just to kind of dumb it down, make sure that everybody understands. These monies, if passed by us and they go on the ballot, and if approved by the voters, would add additional police officers to our current police force. And that's what that money would go for, is to pay for them, their salaries, their training, and their equipment. Am I correct in that assumption, sir? It's accurate.
You are absolutely correct, sir. Only additional police officers.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mills?
I support what we're doing here. However, I'd like to make a motion to add to the end of that, to say if approved by the voters, this tax will continue for a period of not to exceed 20 years from its adoption to sunset thereafter, unless renewed by the voters prior to its expiration. Again, it just allows the voters a little bit more accountability, in the city, a little more accountability to the voters. I have no doubt if we do what we say we do, it would be approved. It'll continue. Almost every sales tax I've seen with had a sunset, that has happened, but it just gives the voters a peace of mind that there is some accountability. If the city does not do what they do, they have, the right to do away with the tax in 20 years.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Motion's been made and seconded to offer an amendment to the original motion to add additional language to the referendum. You want to repeat that again? I didn't have it written down.
If approved by the voters, this tax will continue for a period not to exceed 20 years from its adoption to sunset thereafter, unless renewed by the voters prior to its expiration.
Okay, sir, thank you. That's the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Holman?
I can't support this one. What happens if we don't have the money in 20 years? Do we give pink slips to 5, 10, 8 of our officers? How does that work? If we're going to put people on, if we're going to hire people, they come here in good faith. If they're doing a good job, that we're going to keep them on and we're going to need them. So I think this is a bad idea. If this were for a capital project, I can understand. But this is not a capital project. This is hiring human beings who will require that monetary salary to maintain their life and pay for their rent and their housing and their food. I'm opposed to it, sir.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion? Mr. Delgo?
And I'll just add to that, the conversation we had in the work session. I know, Mr. Mills, you weren't in the work session when we discussed the sunset option for this. It was pointed out that the need for the officers also is not going to go away. As we get more businesses and more residents in town, we see more pull on our police force, and a lot of the not requirements, but recommendations for how many officers you should have in a city are based on the number of residents and the number of businesses. And as we grow, we'll just need more. So the opportunity to cut that doesn't seem like it would really appear, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Barber?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll piggyback on both those comments. We're not dealing with a stadium here. We're dealing with our public safety of the city of Raymore, and I don't see that going away in 20 years. So I would not support having a sunset.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, I saw your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I do support that even with this, it was discussed in work session, that even with the addition of the 8 police officers, we'd still not be to the staffing that we require in the city for our population. I know there was some talk amongst people publicly in the last couple of days about what numbers do we really need, looking at responses and calls and that sort of thing. I do think it offers, the sunset clause offers an accountability to the city, as Councilman Holman said. If we don't have the money in 20 years, it would provide an opportunity publicly for our constituents and our city, and our citizens within our city to see where we're going to come up with the money. I think it would be prudent that we found the money, but it's also our dedication up here when we do budgetary matters that we come up with, okay, if we need to fund the additional police officers, we don't have the tax increment coming in at that point, where do we find the money? And it puts us back to a square one situation where if that is the case in, say, 19 and a half years, we are going to have to come up with a plan of, if the tax revenue is not generating to support those 8 police officers, where are we going to find the money? And I think fiscally being responsible is key. That's what our citizens want. And I think most citizens would support this, that we know it's needed, but they also want to be transparent in the process of, if we need X number of dollars, where is it going to come from if we don't have it? Something else would have to lose if we have to make up that money in 20 years. So I support the sunset clause as would be prudent for just financial fiscal responsibility. And in 20 years, we have a ton of businesses out here. It's going to be a moot point. It'll sail through more than likely. But if not, then we need to make the decisions and go through the process. So therefore, I support it from that standpoint. Let the voters decide. I've always said, we make the decisions up here, but ultimately, just like this sales tax, it's the voters that make the ultimate decision out there on it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Circo, Mr. Mills? Okay. Who wants to go first?
You know, it just, everything that everybody said just, in a sense, confirms why I put this amendment on here, is again, there's more than likely there is going to be a need. People are going to see that, and they're going to see the value of that. You don't have to wait till the last minute to renew a sales tax. You have opportunity to do that ahead of time. But again, I just believe it gives any business or anything that little extra piece of accountability that people know, hey, I can trust my government, I can trust what's being done, because if they don't do what they say, we have the ability for this to go away. I believe 100% that whatever council's in place, our city staff's in place, whatever police chief we have in place, they're going to honor this. They're going to be fiscally responsible. They're going to do what needs to be there, and people will support this. I mean, we may need to increase it to a half cent instead of a quarter cent, or it may be a situation where we have a surplus and we decrease it. But I think we have to give those voters to know that there is an opportunity down the road to hold us accountable if we do not do what we say.
Okay. Mr. Circo.
I appreciate the discussion up here from all of my colleagues. I think I've been on 6 times, I've been out there on election day, 13 hours, talking to the people 6 different times over the years. And what I get from the people, even on that Proposition P, and so what I got from the voters are, we want more PD, we want security, and a lot of people I talk to who moved here in the past from Blue Springs or whatever, I say, why did you move to Raymore? And they say, for safety and security. We hear you're a top-notch PD, it's very secure. So that's what I've always heard over the years. But the people are always afraid, like I've talked before, that it would go into a general fund and they would start spending elsewhere and then it maybe run short. And they were scared of that. But with the verbiage now that's locked in, it's for the PD, it's for the future growth, people will stand up and vote. I really believe that if it gets to the ballot, they will vote this because it's a guaranteed lock verbiage of where the money will be. And that's always been a mainstay for the voters in this city for many years. If we got to vote something, like when it comes to PD, we want to make sure it's locked in and we know where it's going and it's not going to drift off anywhere else. And the way this is set up now, it is for that. And it'll always be just for that. And I know we're going to grow, and I believe in the city of Raymore. I love this city. I love everything, our PD and everything that goes with them. And we need them, and we need more, and we need that to grow. And people are coming here for the security first. Now, it used to be schools, it used to be, but now a lot of it's for security. And they believe in the city of Raymore and the PD and what we have to offer. So I love the verbiage. I think you lock it in and let the voters know if it gets to that ballot that this is the money for these, and that money's not drifting off to any other funds, any other general purposes. And I love that verbiage, and I think that will help really expand a yes vote in the future if it gets to the ballot.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? There's no further discussion. There is an amendment on the floor, and you heard what the amendment and the discussion was about. All those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? Abstain? Oh, no, you're voting yes? Okay. So there's 2 yes and 6 no's. The amendment motion fails. So now we're back to the original motion for the adoption of the first reading of Bill 3937 in its initial integrity. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. That concludes our new business this evening. We'll now move on to public comments. If anyone from the public would care to address the council at this time, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. I see no one coming forward, so we'll close the public comment section this evening, and I'll move on to mayor-council communication. Mr. Mills, I'll start with you tonight, sir.
Well, I'll just keep it short. I just wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and hopefully a very safe Christmas and Happy New Year's, and not a lot of extra work for our public safety and law enforcement.
Thank you. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to echo that sentiment. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone. I would say Christmas is a special time in Raymore. We have the mayor's Christmas tree, City Hall's lit up. I think this city, when you drive around, we do an excellent job for those that take part in decorating homes and all that. I know in Ward 1, I'll stand up for my own ward, that we have a ton of houses that are awesomely decorated in Ward 1. So for all of you in Ward 1 who do that, awesome job for you. But around the city, we have a lot of great displays. And I think that's, those that can do it, congratulations and great job. So,
Thank you, sir. Mr. Burke, I'm going to flip-flop here tonight.
I'm ready, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you. This is something that happened in the news last week that was pretty exciting, and since it goes along with our ballot issue, wanting to have as safe a city, I think we should stop saying crime-free Lenexa, whatever that advertisement was, and say crime-free Raymore. But anyway, there was a thing that happened in the Senate last week. It was, they passed the windfall eliminations provision, government offset pensions, or government pensions offset. And what it did is, for all of us, all my brothers and sisters in teaching, in law enforcement, in firefighting, at the post office, all of those people that had to work second jobs, and maybe to get into those professions in the beginning, paid into Social Security. And in 13 states, one of them being Missouri, you get a significant, I think it was 60% of your Social Security is gone. And if you were expecting your spouse to pass and you were going to get their Social Security, because you were in one of those professions, you didn't get any of it. So I had to go around to really brilliant teachers that we were recruiting from other states that were older. And I'm like, if you stay here for 5 years, do you know you're going to lose all your Social Security? You need to leave. And fortunately, that's not going to happen anymore. So every little bit, when, people work jobs that are public service jobs, a lot of times they have to do private service for their family after that one's over. So I think that's pretty awesome. It's something my union's been working for 40 years. So thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I just want to touch on the, thank you. We got that 163rd. We got Sunset. I am so very happy that's going forward. That's going to be a big addition, and plus our city, how things work, and for the people, especially north. It's going to be fantastic. That's good news. Mr. Mustine, great on the bridges. You're getting them in there. The walkways are done at the park. So that's a good thing. Can't wait to get those bridges up and going. I love those. And just want to say Merry Christmas. This is a time we all get together, and it's about giving. Definition of Christ's love is always continuous giving with no expectation of return. That's what agape love is, Jesus' love. So if we'd all give and not expect something, how that would work when it got going around. So let's just all have a very Merry Christmas. Enjoy your families, but remember it is the Lord's birthday. That's what we do on its Christmas. So I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, you and your families, your health, your direction, your safety, a Happy New Year. And I'll close with that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Holman.
Thank you, sir. I would like to take a moment to thank Mr. Fearborn and staff for an exceptional year. I think we've done very well, as we have for quite a while, and it's really showing. I'd like to spotlight Mr. Gress and the Economic Development and Community Development team. The acquisition of Chick-fil-A is an example of success begetting success. You can see with the movement of dirt in that area and the looks of the streets, Mr. Salisbury, business is coming, and it's because of the work that you are doing. We're getting ready to open Chick-fil-A. I think Baskin-Robbins is open or about to open. We're going to have Einstein Brothers. That's going to continue to roll, especially in that area up there in the southwest corner of Ward 3, and a really higher desirable corner for traffic and for retailers. Really good stuff. Exceptional work. It does not go unnoticed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Wilson for volunteering for the park board. We cannot run the city without our citizen volunteers, so welcome, and I know you do a good job, and thank you for doing that. Secondly, I didn't get a chance talk about, I had my daughter and son-in-law and grandson in for Thanksgiving, and they got to use Hawk Ridge Park. And so they live in Tucson, and they were blown away. Even the second time we went out and there was ice on the stuff, I don't think my grandson's ever slid down a slide with ice on it in his life. But don't be surprised that you might get a call from the parks director in Tucson, Nathan. They were very, very, very impressed. I want to talk about how blessed this city is, what a difference a year has made, and truly coming into the holiday season, we have a whole lot to be thankful for. So I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I think 2025 is going to be greater than 2024, which that was a pretty good year. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ingert.
I just want to real quickly say Merry Christmas and a healthy New Year come 2025 for everyone. It was kind of exciting sitting up here tonight and hearing the staff reports that 163rd Street's now open, and the rack is now open. And once you find that, it's like, I know where I'm going as soon as this meeting is going to go over. I'm going to go drive by and take a look at all this stuff to see. Now, I know it's going to be hard at nighttime, but I can tell everybody that I was on this road first. So anyway, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Abdogwad.
Thank you, sir. I just want to take a minute and point out our amazing staff. I think what we saw tonight with the vacation of that alleyway is a prime example of how our city staff works with people who live in Raymore to try to help them. You hear about people going to bigger cities especially and asking for help, asking for solutions to their problems, and lots of times the cities just point them to an attorney. That's your problem, that's not our problem, that's a civil matter, go figure it out on your own. But after hearing the story from both of the people who spoke tonight and Mr. Gress, it seems like this is really just a great example of the excellence we have in our city staff in helping people in Raymore to solve problems and work together and be a community. So on that note, just happy holidays to my fellow council members, our city staff, and the constituents.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'll finish off this evening by saying, well, that was a heck of a game, wasn't it, Tom, that Army-Navy game? Oh, I just had to bring that up. Anyway, Merry Christmas to everybody, and have a Happy New Year. Our staff did some great, wonderful work, as they always do every year. But this year, the first half of the year was a challenge, as we were still fighting a landfill. The second half of the year was a challenge while we caught our momentum back up and got to doing the work of the community with the development and making sure that it's the right kind of development that comes to our community. Very proud of the work that the staff did in putting those things together. Mr. Wilson, thank you for volunteering again. You did a great job on the Charter Commission. If you do a tenth of what you did there, you'll be great on the Parks Board. I know you worked hard on that years ago. But it is a great team up here, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And anyway, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody here on the podium and in the audience and on the staff and the city of Raymore. And I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Your Honor.
Mr. Holman.
Sir, I move that we enter into executive session to discuss personnel matters as authorized by the revised statute, State of Missouri 610.021 subsection 3.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Abdel-Gawad. Motion been made and seconded to go into executive session. Could I have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Abdel-Gawad?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Barber?
Yes.
Councilmember Burke?
Yes.
Councilmember Circo?
Yes.
Councilmember Ingert?
Yes.
Councilmember Holman?
Yes.
Councilmember Mills?
Yes.
Thank you. We will now go into executive session.